The champagne glass felt wrong in David Torres's calloused hand. Around him, 200 people in tailored suits and designer dresses mingled under crystal chandeliers in the Grand Hyatt Seattle ballroom, their laughter echoing off marble columns. David stood near the service entrance, still wearing his navy quick-fleet jacket with the company logo, a stylized lightning bolt that had become synonymous with same-day delivery across 48 states. The jacket smelled like rain and exhaust fumes because he'd been making deliveries until 47 minutes ago. "Ladies and gentlemen," the event coordinator's voice crackled through the sound system, "please find your seats. Mr. Chen will be speaking shortly." David's phone buzzed, a text from his daughter. "Dad, Emma's fever is 102. Should I take her to urgent care?" He typed back quickly, "Give her children's Tylenol. I'll be home in 2 hours. Love you both." He shouldn't have come. When the cream-colored envelope arrived at his apartment 3 weeks ago, addressed to David Torres, top performer, Seattle region, he'd assumed it was a mistake. The invitation inside, embossed with gold lettering, requested his presence at Quickfleet's 10th anniversary celebration. "Exclusive gathering for leadership and distinguished team members," it read. There would be dinner, awards, and remarks from Marcus Chen himself, the 34-year-old founder and CEO, worth an estimated $2 billion. His girlfriend, Enna, had insisted he attend. "Maybe they're finally going to do something about the wages," she'd said, ironing his only dress shirt, "or announce benefits. You've been their top driver for 3 years, David. They have to see that." David had laughed, bitter and tired. "They see the numbers, not the people." But Anna's hope was infectious, and his 17-year-old daughter Sophia had looked up from her homework with something close to pride when he mentioned the invitation. So he'd requested the evening off, losing a Friday night's earnings, his most profitable shift, and driven his 10-year-old Honda Civic downtown, parking 4 blocks away because the hotel valet was $30. Now, watching tech executives and venture capitalists settle into their seats, David felt the familiar weight of being invisible in plain sight. He'd spent 3 years navigating their driveways, hauling their packages up 4 flights of stairs, leaving their groceries on million-dollar porches. They'd never seen his face. To them, he was a notification on their phone. "Your delivery has arrived." Marcus Chen emerged from backstage, and the room's energy shifted. He moved with the easy confidence of someone who'd never worried about a car payment or a child's medical bill. His charcoal suit probably cost more than David made in 2 months. At 34, Chen was boyish, his black hair artfully disheveled, his smile practiced and symmetrical. Forbes had called him the architect of the gig economy renaissance. Time magazine had featured him in their 40 Under 40 issue. "Thank you all for being here," Chen began, his voice amplified and warm. 10 years ago, Quickfleet was just an idea in a Stanford dorm room. Today, we're a $10 billion company serving 83 million customers. And we couldn't have done it without our incredible team. The applause was enthusiastic. David noticed the other delivery drivers scattered throughout the room, maybe 20 of them, all wearing the same navy jackets, all standing rather than sitting, as if they weren't sure they belonged at the tables. He recognized Maria from the Northgate hub and James, who worked the Bellevue route. Their faces held the same cautious optimism he'd felt when he first arrived. Chen clicked to the next slide, a graph showing Quickfleet's exponential growth. "Our efficiency metrics are unmatched in the industry. Last quarter we completed 3 million deliveries with an average time of 31 minutes from order to doorstep. That's innovation." David thought about the reality behind those numbers. The app that tracked every minute of their shifts, the algorithm that penalized them for bathroom breaks, the constant pressure to accept more deliveries, drive faster, work longer. He thought about last winter when he'd delivered packages through a snowstorm because declining shifts would tank his rating. He'd made $240 that day and spent $70 on gas. Innovation requires honesty, Chen continued, his tone shifting to something more intimate. It requires us to face hard truths about ourselves and our industry. So tonight I want to try something different. He paused for effect, scanning the room. I'm going to make you all a promise. If anyone here, and I mean anyone, wants to tell me a hard truth about QuickFleet, about our business, about anything, I want to hear it. No repercussions, no judgment, just honesty. He smiled, and David saw something performative in it. Tell me the truth and I'll respect you for it. Who knows, you might even change my mind about something. The room laughed politely. It was clearly meant as a rhetorical gesture, a way to seem approachable and self-aware. Several executives shifted in their seats, preparing to offer carefully calibrated critiques, the kind that sounded honest but ultimately reinforced the status quo. David's phone buzzed again. Sophia. She's asking for you. When will you be home? He looked at Marcus Chen on that stage, bathed in spotlights. Smiling his practiced smile, he thought about his 8-year-old daughter Emma burning with fever in their 2-bedroom apartment in Renton. He thought about the 2 847 packages he'd delivered this year, the 68-hour weeks, the $32 hour he'd earned before taxes, barely above the poverty line for a family of 3. He thought about the app on his phone that controlled his livelihood, designed by people who'd never missed a meal or chosen between rent and medication. Something in David's chest tightened. Not anger exactly, something older and deeper, a kind of exhaustion with being silent. Before he could reconsider, he raised his hand. The room's attention shifted, heads turned. Marcus Chen's eyes found him standing by the service entrance, still in his QuickFleet jacket, still holding the champagne he hadn't drunk. Yes? Chen said, his smile widening, clearly expecting an easy question. Please, come up here. Don't be shy. David walked to the front of the room. His work boots, scuffed and salt-stained from winter deliveries, sounded too loud against the marble floor. He could feel every eye on him. When he reached the stage, Chen extended his hand. David shook it. Chen's grip was firm but soft, the hand of someone who'd never loaded a truck or carried a 50-pound box up 3 flights of stairs. What's your name? Chen asked, still holding the microphone. David Torres. I'm a driver, Seattle region, 3 years. David, excellent. Thank you for being here, David. You're one of our top performers, right? I've seen your numbers. Chen turned to the audience. This is exactly what I'm talking about. The people who make QuickFleet work. David, you have a question? A truth you want to share? David's mouth went dry. Around him, 200 faces waited. He thought about walking away, sitting back down, going home to his daughter, but Sophia's text was still on his phone. She's asking for you. You said you'd respect honesty, David said quietly. Absolutely. Chen's smile didn't waver. And no repercussions. You have my word. David looked at him, really looked at him, and saw someone who'd likely never broken a promise that mattered. Not because he was honest, but because he'd never been in a position where a broken promise would cost him anything real. The truth, David said, his voice steady now, carrying across the silent ballroom, is that I can't afford to take my daughter to the doctor. The room went absolutely still. I work 68 hours a week for your company. I've been your top performer in this region for 3 consecutive years. I've delivered 2 847 packages this year with a 99.4% satisfaction rating, and tonight, while I'm here, my 8-year-old daughter is home with a 102-degree fever because I can't afford to take her to urgent care. The copay would be $90, and I need that $90 for groceries. Chen's smile had frozen on his face. You talk about efficiency metrics, David continued. About 31 minutes from order to doorstep. Do you know how we achieve those numbers? We skip bathroom breaks, we eat lunch while driving, we risk traffic tickets and accidents because the algorithm penalizes us for being even 3 minutes late. I've urinated in bottles in my car because stopping at a gas station would tank my acceptance rate. Someone in the audience gasped. David saw a woman in a pearl necklace put her hand over her mouth. Last year, I made $32,000 before taxes. I'm a single father raising 2 daughters. We live in a 2-bedroom apartment where the heat doesn't always work. Last winter, when you were featured on the cover of Forbes, I was delivering packages in a snowstorm because I couldn't afford to decline shifts. I made $240 that day. I spent $70 on gas. I came home at midnight, and my daughters were wearing their winter coats inside because the landlord hadn't fixed the heating. David's hands were shaking now, but his voice remained calm. You said your company is worth $10 billion. You, personally, are worth over $7 billion. And I, one of your top performers, can't take my sick child to the doctor without choosing between her health and feeding her next week. The silence in the ballroom was crushing. So here's my truth, Mr. Chen. David looked directly into his eyes. Your innovation is built on our poverty. Your efficiency is built on our exhaustion. Your billions are built on the fact that people like me can't afford to say no. And the hardest truth, you don't actually want to hear this. You want the performance of honesty. You want to seem approachable and self-aware. But nothing is going to change when I walk out of this room, because men like you don't respect honesty. You respect power, and I don't have any. David set the champagne glass down on the stage. The crystal made a small, sharp sound against the wood. But you asked for the truth. So there it is. He turned and walked back through the silent crowd, past the frozen faces and open mouths, past the executives and investors and managers, past his fellow drivers who were staring at him with expressions he couldn't read. Shock, fear, something like awe. He pushed through the ballroom doors and into the hotel corridor. His heart was hammering. His hands were still shaking. He'd just destroyed his job, his income, everything his family depended on. His phone buzzed as he reached the lobby. Not Sophia this time, not Anna. It was a notification from the Quick Fleet Driver app. Your account has been flagged for review. Please contact regional management. David stood in the Grand Hyatt lobby, rain beginning to fall outside the massive windows, and felt the full weight of what he'd just done crash down on him. Behind him, in the ballroom, 200 people were probably already forgetting his words, returning to their champagne and their conversations about disruption and growth. But David Torres had told the truth, and it was going to cost him everything. David was sitting in his daughter's bedroom, one hand on Emma's forehead. Her fever had broken, finally, when his phone started buzzing continuously. Not calls, notifications, dozens, then hundreds, then thousands. Anna appeared in the doorway, holding her own phone, her face illuminated by the blue-white glow. David, you need to see this. Someone in that ballroom had recorded his speech. The video was shaky, shot from the back of the room, but the audio was crystal clear. David watched himself on the small screen. A tired-looking man in a work jacket, standing on a stage next to a billionaire, saying words he'd already begun to regret. It's everywhere, Anna whispered. Twitter, TikTok, Reddit, Instagram. People are sharing it with the hashtag #ChatDeliveryDriverTruth. By midnight, the video had 2 million views. By 1 a.m., 5 million. By the time David fell into an exhausted sleep at 2:30, it had been viewed 8 million times and was trending on every major social media platform. He woke up 4 hours later to someone pounding on his apartment door. Through the peephole, David saw a young woman with a camera and a man holding a microphone with a local news station logo. Behind them, 2 more people he didn't recognize, all holding phones, All filming. Mr. Torres, I'm Jessica Rains from Kiro 7 News. We'd love to get your statement about last night's incident. David didn't open the door. He texted Anna, who lived 3 blocks away. Don't come over. There are reporters outside. Her response was immediate. They're here too, at my apartment. How did they find me? Sophia emerged from her bedroom, still in her pajamas, and went straight to the window. Dad, there are like 6 people down there with cameras. Don't go near the window, David said too sharply. He softened his voice. It's okay, Mika. Just stay away from the windows, okay? His phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. He let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. Different number. He turned it off. Emma padded into the living room, rubbing her eyes. Her fever had broken, but she looked pale and fragile in her frozen pajamas. Why are there people outside? Nothing for you to worry about, baby. How are you feeling? Better. My throat still hurts. David pulled her into a hug, trying to shield her from whatever was happening outside their walls. Sophia stood at the window, carefully peering down at the growing crowd on the sidewalk. Dad, she said quietly. One of them just broadcast our address on Facebook Live. David's stomach dropped. He grabbed his phone, still off, and powered it back on. The notifications were overwhelming. 15,000 new Twitter followers, 2,000 friend requests on Facebook, hundreds of messages from strangers, journalists, activists, supporters, trolls, and one email that made his blood go cold. The subject line read, "Official notice of contract termination." He opened it with shaking hands. "Dear David Torres, effective immediately. Your contract with QuickFleet has been terminated for violation of Section 7, 3B of your independent contractor agreement. Public statements or actions that damage the reputation or business interests of QuickFleet, Inc. Your final payment will be processed within 14 business days. Your access to the driver platform has been revoked. Please return all QuickFleet property, including your insulated delivery bag and company jacket, to the Renton Distribution Center within 72 hours. We wish you the best in your future endeavors." David read it twice, then a third time. He'd expected it. Of course he'd expected it. But seeing it in writing made it real. He was unemployed. He had $347 in his checking account, rent due in 12 days, and 2 daughters who needed to eat. Dad? Sophia was watching him, 17 years old and too perceptive. What is it? Nothing, baby. It's fine. But it wasn't fine. By 9 a.m., the story had been picked up by the Washington Post, the New York Times, and CNN. By 10 a.m., QuickFleet stock had dropped 2%. By 11 a.m., Boycott QuickFleet was trending alongside delivery driver truth. David's phone wouldn't stop ringing. He turned it off again, but Anna called from a neighbor's phone. "Turn on your TV," she said. "Channel 7. He did. There was Marcus Chen, sitting across from a news anchor, looking composed and concerned. "I want to be absolutely clear," Chen was saying. "Mr. Torres's termination had nothing to do with his speech last night. We have a strict policy against employees making public statements during company events that violate their NDAs. This was a contractual matter, not retaliation." "But you invited him to speak," the anchor pressed. "You said, and I quote, 'Tell me the truth and I'll respect you.'" "I invited open dialogue during a private company event," Chen replied smoothly. "What happened was Mr. Torres chose to make inflammatory public statements that misrepresent our business model and the opportunities we provide to thousands of independent contractors. We have great respect for our drivers, but we also have to protect the integrity of our platform." David's phone, still off, somehow started vibrating anyway. Sophia was getting calls on her cell. Someone was knocking on the door again. "We need to leave," Anna said through the phone. "Take the girls and come to my sister's place in Tacoma. You can't stay there." But before David could respond, His phone, now back on, lit up with a call from a 212 area code. New York. He almost didn't answer. "Mr. Torres, this is Rebecca Santana. I'm an attorney with the National Employment Law Project. I watched your video. I'd like to help." David sank onto his couch. Emma climbed into his lap. Outside, he could hear voices, reporters, probably, or supporters, or people with cameras hoping to catch him emerging from his apartment. "I can't afford a lawyer," he said quietly. "Pro bono, Mr. Torres. No cost to you. I think you have a strong case for wrongful termination and labor law violations. But I need to know, are you willing to fight this? Because it's going to get worse before it gets better. Quick Fleet has an army of lawyers and a PR machine that will try to destroy your credibility. They'll dig into your background, your finances, your personal life. They'll find every mistake you've ever made and publicize it. Are you prepared for that?" David looked at his daughters. Sophia, watching him with her mother's eyes, her mother who died of breast cancer 4 years ago because they couldn't afford treatment until it was too late. Emma curled against his chest, still recovering from a fever he'd almost not treated because of $90. "What choice do I have?" he said. "You always have a choice, Mr. Torres. You can take their severance, sign their NDA, and walk away. Or you can fight. But fighting means exposing yourself, your family, everything. It means becoming a symbol for something bigger than just your own case. Are you ready for that?" Through the window, David could see the rain starting again. Seattle rain, persistent, grey, cold. He'd driven through rain like this 1,000 times, delivering packages to people who never saw his face, never knew his name. "I told the truth," he said. "That shouldn't cost me my job." "In an ideal world, no. But we don't live in an ideal world, Mr. Torres. We live in one where billion-dollar companies can crush individuals who speak up. My job is to make it expensive enough for them that they think twice about doing it to the next person. Are you in?" David thought about the 847 packages he'd delivered this year, the 68-hour weeks, the bathroom breaks he'd skipped, the winter nights when his daughters wore coats inside because the heat didn't work and he couldn't afford to move. He thought about Marcus Chen's smile on that stage, the champagne glass, the promise of respect that had evaporated the moment David had actually told the truth. "Yes," David said. "I'm in." The knock on the door came again, harder this time. Sophia walked over and looked through the peephole. "Dad," she said, her voice strange. "There are like 30 people out there now. Some have signs." David crossed to the window and carefully looked down at the street. She was right. A crowd had gathered, reporters with cameras, but also other people, regular people, some holding handwritten signs. "We stand with David. Delivery drivers are human. Dignity over profit." His phone buzzed. A text from a number he didn't recognize. "This is James. I work the Bellevue route. You spoke for all of us last night. Don't back down." Another text from Maria at the Northgate hub. "Whatever you need, brother. We got your back." And then a flood of messages from numbers he'd never seen. "I'm a driver in Portland, starting a walkout tomorrow. Boston driver here. We're organizing. Chicago stands with you. LA drivers are with you all the way." David stood in his small living room, his daughters beside him, reporters pounding on his door, his job gone, his future uncertain, and felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years of driving for Quick Fleet. He felt like he mattered, like he wasn't invisible. "Mr. Torres," Rebecca Santana was still on the phone. "Are you there?" "I'm here," David said. "Good, because we have work to do." "And David?" "Yes?" "Thank you for telling the truth. The hard part starts now." David looked at his daughters. Sophia nodded. "Just slightly." Emma squeezed his hand. "I'm ready," he said. Outside, the rain continued to fall, and the crowd continued to grow. The lawsuit was filed on Tuesday. By Wednesday, Quick Fleet stock had dropped another 7%. By Thursday, drivers in 14 cities had organized walkouts, leaving thousands of deliveries unfulfilled. By Friday, Marcus Chen was no longer doing interviews. David spent those days in a borrowed office at the National Employment Law Project, going through 3 years of records, every delivery, every mile driven, every bathroom break skipped, every algorithm-generated penalty that had docked his pay. Rebecca Santana sat across from him, her laptop open, building a case that had grown far beyond simple wrongful termination. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a spreadsheet. "In 3 years, you drove 87,643 miles for QuickFleet. At the IRS standard mileage rate, that's $50,426 in vehicle expenses. But QuickFleet paid you $32,000 total last year. You essentially paid them to work." David stared at the numbers. He'd known abstractly that the math didn't work, but seeing it laid out like this made something crystallize in his chest, not anger anymore, but a cold, clear understanding of how thoroughly he'd been exploited. His phone buzzed. "Anna, CNN wants to interview you. Tonight. National." He showed Rebecca the message. She nodded. "Do it. But let me prep you first. They're going to ask about your background, your finances, your late wife. Everything is fair game now. I know. Do you? Because QuickFleet's lawyers released a statement an hour ago." She turned her laptop around. David read, "While we respect Mr. Torres's right to free speech, recent investigations have revealed concerning patterns in his delivery history, including multiple customer complaints, traffic violations incurred during working hours, and failure to maintain required insurance documentation. Mr. Torres's termination was the result of performance issues predating his appearance at our anniversary event. We remain committed to supporting our independent contractors who meet our standards of excellence." David felt his jaw tighten. "That's bullshit. I was their top performer. I know, but they're going to try to destroy your credibility. They'll find every negative review, every late delivery, every mistake you've ever made. They need you to be the problem, not the system. Can you handle that?" Before David could answer, Sophia appeared in the doorway. She'd taken the bus from school, still wearing her backpack. "Dad, you need to see this." She held out her phone. It was a TikTok video, a young woman, maybe 22, sitting in her car, crying. The caption read, "QuickFleet driver, just got deactivated for supporting David Torres, single mom of 2, don't know what to do." "There are dozens like this," Sophia said quietly. "Drivers getting fired for posting about you, for joining the walkouts, for speaking up. They're calling it performance-based terminations, but everyone knows it's retaliation." Rebecca leaned forward. "Send me that link. This is exactly what we need. They're creating a pattern of retaliation. Every driver they terminate strengthens our case." But David wasn't thinking about the case. He was thinking about that young woman crying in her car, about the drivers losing their jobs because he'd spoken up, about the kids who wouldn't eat tonight because their parents had been brave enough to stand with him. "This is my fault," he said. "No." Anna had arrived, standing in the doorway behind Sophia. "This is QuickFleet's fault. You just exposed it." The CNN interview happened at 8 p.m. in a borrowed studio in downtown Seattle. David sat across from Anderson Cooper, wearing the same dress shirt he'd worn to the anniversary gala, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "Mr. Torres, QuickFleet says your termination was performance-based. How do you respond?" "I was their top performer in the Seattle region for 3 consecutive years. I have the numbers to prove it. This is retaliation, pure and simple." They've also raised questions about customer complaints. "In 3 years, I delivered nearly 9,000 packages. 37 people left negative reviews. That's a 99.6% satisfaction rate. But QuickFleet is focusing on those 37 reviews instead of the thousands of satisfied customers because they need to make me the villain. They need people to think I deserved this." Cooper leaned forward. What do you say to critics who argue that you knew what you were signing up for? That gig economy work is voluntary, and if you didn't like the conditions, you could have found another job? David took a breath. This was the question Rebecca had warned him about, the one designed to make him seem entitled, unreasonable. I say that's easy to argue when you have options. When you're a single father with 2 kids, and you've been out of the traditional workforce for 4 years because you were caring for your dying wife, your options are limited. QuickFleet offered flexible hours and immediate income. I needed both. So yes, I chose this. But choosing to work shouldn't mean choosing to live in poverty. Choosing to work shouldn't mean choosing between your child's health and next week's groceries. QuickFleet would argue they're providing opportunities. They're providing poverty with a smartphone app. David interrupted. They're worth $10 billion because they've figured out how to extract maximum value from workers while providing minimum compensation. They call us independent contractors, so they don't have to provide health insurance, sick leave, or benefits. But they control every aspect of our work through algorithms. They track our every move. They penalize us for bathroom breaks. We have all the responsibilities of employees with none of the protections. That's not opportunity. That's exploitation with good branding. The interview went viral immediately. By midnight, the exploitation with good branding was trending. By morning, 3 Democratic senators had called for congressional hearings on gig economy labor practices. By noon, drivers in 28 cities had joined the walkout, and then QuickFleet made their move. The leaked video appeared on a right-wing media site Friday afternoon. It showed David from 2 years ago, shot on someone's doorbell camera, apparently kicking a package in frustration after it wouldn't fit through a mail slot. The package wasn't damaged. David remembered the incident. He'd gently nudged it to see if it would slide under, but the angle made it look aggressive. The headline read, "Hero Delivery Driver's History of Package Abuse Revealed." By evening, a second video surfaced. David's car illegally parked in a fire zone while he made a delivery. Then a third, a Ring camera recording showing David apparently arguing with a customer about a delivery location. Rebecca called him at 6 p.m. They're drowning you in bad optics. Every news cycle, they're releasing something new to damage your credibility. Tomorrow they'll probably leak something about your finances or your personal life. She was right. Saturday morning, a conservative blog published an article about David's credit card debt, $14,000, his student loans from a degree he'd never finished, $23,000, and his wife's medical bills that had gone to collections, $87,000. The implication was clear. David Torres was financially irresponsible, looking for a payday, blaming others for his own poor decisions. David sat in Anna's apartment. They'd moved there after his address had been published, and read the article on her laptop. Sophia was next to him, Emma playing on the floor. They're making it seem like you're the problem, Sophia said quietly. That's the point, Anna replied. They want people to think he's just some deadbeat looking for attention. David's phone rang. Rebecca again. The Washington Post wants to run a feature story. Deep dive on gig economy labor. They want access to your life, your apartment, your finances, your daughters, everything. It'll be invasive, but it'll also let you tell your full story. Your choice. David thought about those medical bills. His wife, Sarah, dying in a hospital bed because they'd caught the cancer too late. Too late because they couldn't afford regular checkups, because neither of them had health insurance, because they'd both been cobbling together gig work and part-time jobs with no benefits. Do it, he said. Let them see everything. The reporter, a woman named Catherine Morrison, arrived Sunday morning. She spent 3 days with David's family, watching him make breakfast for his daughters on a hot plate because the stove was broken, photographing the space heater they used because the apartment's heating was inadequate, interviewing Sophia about her college applications. She'd been accepted to University of Washington, but couldn't afford to go because David couldn't co-sign student loans with his credit. Talking to Emma about what it was like when her mum got sick. "Tell me about the medical debt," Catherine said, sitting at the small kitchen table. David pulled out the folder he'd kept for 4 years. Hospital bills, oncology bills, radiation bills, hospice bills. Sarah found the lump in March. She didn't tell me until June because we didn't have insurance and she was scared of the cost. By the time we went to the ER, it was stage 3. We spent everything we had on treatment. Sold our car, cashed out my 401k, borrowed from family. She died in February. I was left with 2 daughters, no savings, and enough medical debt to bankrupt us. So yes, I have bad credit. Yes, I made financial mistakes. I chose to try to save my wife's life instead of protecting my credit score. I'd make the same choice again. Catherine wrote it all down, photographed the bills, interviewed the hospice nurse who'd cared for Sarah. The article ran the following Sunday. The headline, "The Real Cost of Gig Economy." One family's story. It included photos of David's apartment, his daughters, the stack of medical bills. It included interviews with other quick fleet drivers, all telling similar stories. It included data showing that 38% of gig workers lived below the poverty line, that 47% had no health insurance, that the average gig worker made less than minimum wage after expenses. The article went viral, but so did the backlash. Quickfleet supporters, business advocates, libertarian think tanks, tech industry defenders flooded social media with counter-narratives. They called David entitled. They said he was trying to destroy innovation. They argued that gig work was voluntary, and anyone unhappy with it should simply find another job. Marcus Chen appeared on CNBC Tuesday morning, calm and measured. "I have tremendous respect for the work our drivers do," he said, "but Mr. Torres is fundamentally misrepresenting our business model. We provide flexible opportunities for people who want supplemental income. We're not a traditional employer, and we've never claimed to be. If people want traditional employment with benefits, there are other options available." "But your drivers are making poverty wages," the interviewer pressed. "Our drivers choose their own hours. Many use Quickfleet for supplemental income while maintaining other jobs. The ones who choose to work full-time earn competitive rates for the flexibility they receive." Mr. Torres is conflating his personal financial struggles with systemic issues that simply don't exist. David watched the interview from Anna's apartment. His hands were shaking because Chen was good. He was smooth and reasonable and made David sound like an outlier, a complainer, someone trying to blame his own failures on a company that had given him opportunity. "He's lying," Sophia said. "Everyone knows he's lying." "Does everyone?" David asked. "Or just the people who want to believe he's lying?" His phone buzzed. "Rebecca, emergency meeting, my office, 1 hour." When David arrived, Rebecca wasn't alone. 3 other attorneys sat around her conference table, along with representatives from 2 labor unions and a coalition of gig workers. "Quickfleet is offering a settlement," Rebecca said. "They'll pay you $250 soon. Reinstate your driver account and issue a public apology. In exchange, you sign an NDA, drop the lawsuit, and make a statement saying this was all a misunderstanding." David stared at her. $250 dollars was more money than he'd made in the last 8 years combined. It could pay off his debts, get Sophia through college, buy them a real home. "What about the other drivers?" he asked. "What about them? The ones who got fired for supporting me, the ones still working under the same conditions, what happens to them?" Rebecca leaned back. "Nothing. They keep fighting their own battles, or they don't. But you'll have yours resolved." "With an NDA, so I can't talk about any of this." "That's typically how settlements work, David." One of the union representatives spoke up. "If you take this, the movement loses its figurehead. The walkouts will collapse, the public attention will fade. Quickfleet gets to bury this with a check and a PR apology." But you get to take care of your daughters, another attorney added. That matters too. David sat in that conference room and felt the weight of an impossible choice. Take the money, save his family, abandon everyone else, or keep fighting, risk everything, maybe lose anyway. He thought about that young woman on TikTok crying in her car, about Maria and James and the thousands of other drivers still working for poverty wages, about the next person who would stand up and get crushed because David had taken the money and disappeared. "What happens if I say no?" he asked. Rebecca smiled grimly. "Then we go to trial, we fight. We probably lose because Quickfleet has better lawyers and infinite resources. But we make enough noise that maybe something changes. Maybe Congress actually regulates the gig economy. Maybe other drivers feel empowered to organize. Maybe we lose the battle but win something bigger. Or maybe I lose everything and accomplish nothing." That's possible too. David's phone buzzed. A text from Sophia. "Whatever you decide, I'm proud of you, Dad." He looked around the table at these lawyers and organizers and advocates who were asking him to be brave, to be a symbol, to sacrifice his family's security for a cause that might not even succeed. "How long do I have to decide?" he asked. "They want an answer by Friday," Rebecca said. 5 days. David nodded and stood up. "I need to talk to my daughters." As he walked out of the office building into the Seattle rain, his phone buzzed one more time. An unknown number. He almost didn't answer. "Mr. Torres?" The voice was young, male, nervous. "This is Tyler. I drive for Quickfleet in Austin. I just wanted to say thank you. My daughter was born last week. Premature. She's in the NICU. I can't afford to take time off, but because of the attention your case has brought, some local organizations are helping me with the hospital bills. So, thank you for speaking up. Whatever happens next, you change something for me and my family." David stood in the rain, phone pressed to his ear, and felt something crack open in his chest. "Take care of your daughter, Tyler," he managed to say. "That's what matters." After he hung up, David looked up at the grey Seattle sky and made his decision. He wasn't going to take the money. The deposition took place in a glass-walled conference room 43 floors above downtown Seattle, with views of Puget Sound and the Olympic Mountains beyond. David sat across from 5 Quickfleet attorneys, each wearing suits that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Rebecca was beside him, her own team arranged behind them like chess pieces on a board. Lead counsel for Quickfleet was a man named Richard Grantham, 60-something with silver hair and the kind of practiced authority that came from decades of corporate defense. "Mr. Torres, you've stated publicly that you worked 68 hours per week for Quickfleet. Is that accurate?" "Yes. And during those 68 hours, you were free to decline deliveries, correct?" "Technically, yes. But declining deliveries lowered my acceptance rating, which affected my ability to get future deliveries and could lead to deactivation." "But you had the freedom to decline. The freedom to decline and the freedom to stay employed are different things." Grantham smiled thinly. "Mr. Torres, isn't it true that you filed for bankruptcy in 2019? Rebecca objected. "Relevance? It speaks to Mr. Torres's financial decision-making and his potential motivations for this lawsuit." David felt his jaw tighten. He'd filed for bankruptcy after Sarah's death, after the medical bills had become impossible. It was public record, and now it was being used to paint him as financially irresponsible. "Yes," he said. "I filed for bankruptcy after my wife died of cancer because I chose to pay for her treatment instead of protecting my credit score." "And you have a criminal record." Rebecca leaned forward. "That's deliberately misleading." "A speeding ticket from 2017, David said. 47 in a 35 zone. I paid the fine. If that's what you're calling a criminal record, yes." The deposition lasted 6 hours. They went through every delivery David had ever made, every customer complaint, every late arrival. They questioned his work ethic, his honesty, his motivations. They implied he was looking for a payday, that he was being manipulated by labor organizers, that his real goal was attention and money rather than justice. When it was finally over, David walked out of that building feeling hollowed out. "They're trying to destroy you," Rebecca said as they rode the elevator down. "Make you seem unreliable, desperate, vindictive. It's standard corporate defense strategy. It's working, only if you let it." But it was working. The conservative media machine had fully mobilized against him. Fox News ran segments about entitled gig workers. Op-eds appeared in the Wall Street Journal, arguing that David Torres represented everything wrong with American workers. Unwilling to work hard, always blaming others, expecting handouts. QuickFleet's public support actually increased. Their stock recovered. A poll showed that 52% of Americans believed gig workers should be classified as independent contractors, not employees. David's family paid the price. Sophia faced harassment at school, classmates calling her father a freeloader, a liar, a failure. Someone spray-painted "loser" on the door of their apartment building. Emma's teacher called to say she'd been getting into fights, defending her father against kids who'd heard their parents criticizing him. Anna's hours at the nursing home were cut, not officially because of her association with David, but the timing was suspicious. She was struggling to make rent on her own apartment now. "Maybe you should take the settlement," she said one night, sitting in her tiny kitchen. "This is destroying all of you." "If I take it, they win. Every driver who comes after me will face the same thing. And if you don't take it, you might lose everything anyway. Then they still win, but you have nothing left." The trial date was set for March 15th. As the date approached, the pressure intensified. QuickFleet's lawyers filed motion after motion, trying to get the case dismissed. They deposed everyone David had ever worked with, trying to find contradictions in his story. They brought in economists to argue that gig work was beneficial to workers and the economy. Rebecca's team fought back with their own evidence, thousands of pages documenting poverty-level wages, testimony from drivers across the country, analysis showing how QuickFleet's algorithm forced workers into dangerous conditions, medical records of drivers who'd been injured on the job without insurance or workers' compensation. 2 weeks before the trial, Marcus Chen gave a TED Talk. The title was "Innovation and Responsibility in the Gig Economy." He was articulate, thoughtful, appearing genuinely concerned about the issues David had raised. He announced QuickFleet was launching a driver wellness fund, a $1 million grant program to help drivers facing hardship. He talked about improving transparency in their algorithm. He promised to do better. The media loved it. Headlines praised Chen for listening and evolving. Some commentators suggested David Torres had accomplished his goal. He'd pushed QuickFleet to change, so why continue the lawsuit? David watched the TED Talk from Anna's apartment, Sophia beside him, and felt something close to despair. Because Chen was good at this. He was making himself look like the reasonable one, the innovator willing to adapt, while David looked like someone clinging to grievance, even after getting what he wanted. $1 million fund, Sophia said bitterly. For how many drivers? How many months would that last? "It's PR," David said. "Nothing more." But it was effective PR. 3 of the senators who'd called for hearings changed their tune, praising QuickFleet's responsiveness. 2 major labor unions privately suggested to Rebecca that maybe it was time to settle. They'd made their point, gotten some concessions, and could declare victory. The night before the trial, David sat in the borrowed apartment with his daughters. Sophia had been accepted to UW, but couldn't accept because they had no money. Emma was still having nightmares about her mother, complicated now by the stress of watching their lives fall apart again. Anna was downstairs in her own apartment, facing eviction because her hours had been cut. David's phone rang. Rebecca. Quickfleet's final offer. 500,000. Public apology. Agreement to participate in a joint committee on driver working conditions. You drop the lawsuit, sign an NDA, but you get to be part of shaping future policy. An NDA? Yes, but you'd have influence behind the scenes, and $500,000, David. Think about what that means for your daughters. He looked at Sophia, 17 and brilliant, who'd had to give up her dream school. At Emma, 8 years old, and already learning that speaking truth had consequences. At the pile of bills on the table, rent, utilities, medical copays for Emma's persistent cough. What would you do? He asked Rebecca. I'd probably take the money, she said honestly. But I'm a lawyer with a salary and health insurance. You're a father with 2 kids and no income. There's no wrong answer here, David, just different kinds of sacrifice. After he hung up, Sophia spoke. You should take it, Dad. Sophia, I mean it. This is killing you, killing all of us. And for what? You've already made people pay attention. You've already changed things. The $1 million fund, the policy committee, that wouldn't exist without you. Maybe that's enough. It's not enough. It's crumbs. They're worth $10 billion, and they're offering crumbs while still calling drivers independent contractors, still paying poverty wages, still destroying our lives. Sophia's voice broke. I watch you get up every morning and read the horrible things people say about you online. I see Emma crying because kids at school say her daddy is a liar. I hear Anna crying at night because she might lose her apartment. When does it end, Dad? When do we get to just live? David pulled her into a hug. She was shaking. Emma had started crying too, curled up on the couch. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry I put you through this. Then end it. Take the money. Let us go back to being normal. David held his daughter and felt the full weight of what he'd done, not to Quickfleet but to his own family. He'd made them pay the price for his truth-telling. He'd put his principles ahead of their stability. He'd turned them into symbols when all they'd wanted was to be safe. The next morning, David called Rebecca. I'm taking the settlement. There was a long pause. You're sure? No, but I'm done asking my daughters to sacrifice for my principles. Draw up the papers. The agreement was signed that afternoon. Quickfleet issued a statement. Quickfleet and Mr. David Torres have reached an amicable resolution to their dispute. We respect Mr. Torres's perspective and are committed to ongoing dialogue about driver working conditions. We're pleased to welcome Mr. Torres as a consultant to our newly formed Driver Welfare Committee, where his insights will help shape future policy. We believe this resolution reflects our shared commitment to improving the gig economy for all stakeholders. The media called it a win for both sides. Labour advocates called it a betrayal. The driver walkouts collapsed within 48 hours. Several drivers who'd been fired for supporting David tried to contact him, but the NDA prevented him from responding publicly. David took the settlement money and paid off his debts. He got Sophia enrolled at UW with money for her first 2 years. He moved his family into a 2-bedroom apartment in a safer neighborhood, one with working heat and appliances. He put money into a savings account for Emma's future medical expenses, and then he had to live with what he'd done. 3 months after the settlement, David was working as a warehouse supervisor at a logistics company, a real job with benefits and a salary of $48 a year. It was stable. It was enough. His daughters were thriving. But at night, David would lie awake thinking about the drivers still working for Quickfleet, still making poverty wages, still skipping bathroom breaks and choosing between rent and medical care. He'd think about the young woman on TikTok who'd been fired for supporting him, about Tyler in Austin with his premature daughter, about all the people who'd stood with him, only to watch him settle and disappear behind an NDA. One evening, 6 months after the settlement, David was walking home from work when he saw a quick fleet driver making a delivery across the street. Young guy, maybe 25, wearing the same navy jacket David had worn for 3 years. The driver was moving fast, almost jogging back to his car, checking his phone constantly. David watched him drive away and felt something sharp in his chest. That could have been him. That was still thousands of people every day, trapped in the same system he'd tried to expose. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Maria. From Northgate Hub. Just wanted you to know, some of us are still fighting. We're organizing, building a real union. It's slow, but it's happening. What you started didn't end with your settlement. Just wanted you to know that." David stood on the sidewalk in the Seattle rain, reading that message, and felt tears he'd been holding back for months finally fall. He couldn't respond publicly. The NDA prohibited it, but he could respond as a private citizen. "Thank you," he wrote back. "Keep fighting. I'm sorry I couldn't stay with you." Maria's response came immediately. "You did enough. You showed us it was possible to speak up. The rest is on us." That night, David sat down with his daughters and told them everything. About the settlement, about the NDA, about his guilt and his choices. "Do you regret it?" Sophia asked. "Settling?" David thought about it, really thought about it. "I regret that I had to choose between principles and protecting you. I don't regret choosing you, but I hate that we live in a world where that choice was necessary." "Did it change anything?" Emma asked. "What you did?" David pulled up his laptop and showed them. News articles about new gig worker unions forming in 7 cities, a proposed bill in California to reclassify gig workers, a class action lawsuit against 3 other gig economy companies, using David's case as precedent, the Department of Labor opening investigations into labor practices across the industry. "It started something," he said. "I couldn't finish it. But maybe that's okay. Maybe the point wasn't for me to fix everything. Maybe the point was to make people see what was broken." Sophia leaned against his shoulder. "The driver welfare committee you're on, can you actually change things there?" "Some things, small things. It's not enough, but it's not nothing." "Then maybe you didn't betray everyone," she said quietly. "Maybe you just did what you could." 2 years later, David sat in a congressional hearing room, testifying about his experience. The NDA had a clause that allowed him to respond to official government inquiries. Quickfleet's lawyers had fought to prevent it, but a federal judge had ruled in favor of congressional oversight. Marcus Chen sat 3 rows behind him, flanked by attorneys, his expression carefully neutral. David told his story again, the 68-hour weeks, the poverty wages, the impossible choices. But this time, he also talked about what had changed, the small victories. Quickfleet had implemented a minimum per delivery rate after public pressure. They'd improved their appeal process for driver deactivations. The welfare fund, though small, had helped hundreds of drivers. And he talked about what hadn't changed. The fundamental business model remained exploitative. Drivers were still classified as independent contractors. Wages were still poverty level for full-time workers. The algorithm still controlled their lives. "Mr. Torres," Senator Warren asked, "if you could change one thing about the gig economy, what would it be?" David looked directly at Marcus Chen. "I'd make companies see their workers as human beings, not efficiency metrics. Because once you see someone as human, once you really see them, it becomes impossible to justify their suffering as the cost of innovation." The hearing lasted 5 hours. Afterward, as David was leaving the building, Marcus Chen caught up with him in the hallway. They hadn't spoken since that night at the Grand Hyatt 2.5 years ago. "Mr. Torres," Chen said, "can we talk?" Off the record, David stopped, looked at him. The boyish face was more lined now, the easy confidence slightly dimmed. "What do you want to say?" Chen glanced around. No cameras, no reporters. just two men in a hallway. I wanted to tell you that you were right. About a lot of things. Not all of it. I still believe in the model, in the flexibility and opportunities it creates. But the wage structure, the lack of support, the way we treated you, you were right. Then why haven't you fixed it? Because fixing it means rewriting the entire business model. It means accepting lower profit margins, disappointing shareholders, risking our competitive position. And I'm not brave enough to do that. I built this company. I'm responsible to investors, to employees, to the ecosystem we've created. Changing it isn't as simple as just deciding to be better. That's a coward's excuse. Maybe, probably, but it's the truth. Chen met his eyes. You asked me to respect honesty, so here's mine. I admire what you did. I couldn't have done it. I've spent 2 years trying to justify our practices, trying to make incremental changes that don't threaten the core business. And every time I see a driver on the street, I think about your daughters, about your wife's medical bills, about the $90 you couldn't afford for urgent care. And I know you were right. I just don't know how to fix it without destroying everything I've built. David stood in that hallway, looking at this billionaire who was finally admitting what they both already knew. You asked me once to tell you the truth, David said. Here's another one. You don't respect truth. You respect power. And until the cost of exploitation becomes higher than the cost of change, you'll keep choosing profit, not because you're evil, because you're scared of losing what you have. And that makes you complicit in every driver who can't afford their child's medicine, every family living in poverty, despite working 60 hours a week. You can't fix it? Then at least admit what it is. Exploitation, not innovation, not opportunity. Exploitation. Chen flinched like he'd been struck, but he didn't argue. He just nodded once and walked away. David watched him go, then walked out into the DC sunlight where Anna was waiting with the girls. Sophia was finishing her sophomore year at UW. Emma was thriving in 4th grade, healthy and happy. Anna had gotten a better nursing job with full benefits. They'd survived, but thousands of others were still fighting. How'd it go? Anna asked. I told the truth, David said. Again. Did it help? I don't know yet. 6 months later, California passed legislation reclassifying gig workers as employees, with minimum wage protections and benefits. 3 other states followed. Quickfleet fought it in court and lost. Their stock price dropped 14%. Marcus Chen stepped down as CEO. The changes weren't perfect. There were loopholes, compromises, ongoing legal battles. But it was something. It was more than nothing. David continued working as a warehouse supervisor. He served on a federal task force, studying gig economy labor practices. He spoke at union organizing events, helping drivers understand their rights. And sometimes, late at night, he'd get texts from drivers he'd never met. Thank you for speaking up. You changed my life. I have health insurance now because of what you started. David would read these messages and think about that night at the Grand Hyatt, standing on a stage next to a billionaire, telling a truth that would cost him everything. It had cost him everything. His job, his privacy, his peace. It had put his daughters through hell. It had taken years of his life and left scars that would never fully heal. But it had also changed something. Maybe not everything, maybe not enough, but something. And in the end, David Torres decided that was worth it. Not because the victory was complete, but because silence would have been worse, because his daughters had learned that truth was worth defending, even when it was expensive. Because somewhere in America, a driver was taking their child to urgent care without having to choose between medicine and groceries. The truth hadn't set him free. It had cost him dearly, but it had mattered. And sometimes that had to be enough.